This is the PoolTogether Community Podcast. PoolTogether is the world's #1 no-loss prize savings account, and you can visit PoolTogether.com to deposit.
You're listening to the PoolTogether Community Podcast.
I'm your host, Millie Yearly, a.k.a. Tim, a.k.a. Hot Mike, a.k.a. Hold on for a second, let me go pet one of my cats. And I'm here with George from 3DNS. Dude, thanks so much for being here, my guy.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, really, really great to be here.
Totally. So, listen, we always start the same way on the PoolTogether Community Podcast, and I think it's important that we learn each other's journeys, because I learn something new every time I talk to a guest about how they got into crypto. So please, sir, tell me, how did you get into this crazy world?
Yeah, so it's been a bit of a ride, but first got exposed to crypto in 2013. One of my friends in high school came to school and taught me about this crazy thing called Bitcoin. Didn't quite understand it, but was talking with him more about it. His dad was an engineer, and so he had an extra, shitty processor lying around and helped us get a small mining unit set up. So started playing around with it there. Ended up losing a couple $100 on Mt. Gox. And then sort of over the years was a little bit of like a passive investor, following the space, reading different white papers. It was definitely much more of like a hobby. And then when I graduated college, I ended up going into Walmart e-commerce, sort of your typical traditional standard job. Got a lot of cool experience there, and, was following crypto still. And then especially during sort of DeFi summer, was seeing a lot of really cool applications. There was a lot of, usage going on. And it felt more and more like I just needed to get into the space full time. And that, it's like, in order for this stuff to go anywhere, it needs people to build it. And that this was, one of the coolest opportunities I would probably face in my life. And so about 2-3 years ago, jumped in full time. My first job was at Commonwealth, where I was head of business. So Commonwealth is a DAO tooling provider, does a lot of like DAO governance forum and interfaces. And so I was there for the last 2 years, left at the end of last year. And then was taking some time to sort of evaluate the space. Ended up meeting the founder of 3DNS, Paul, and really liked what he was building. And so ended up joining the team.
Nice. So you've been there since like beginning of 2023?
Yeah, about April or so. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So, wow, that's kind of a jump, right? DAO tooling governance to Web3 DNS services, yeah. So,
Yes, yeah.
What's the learning curve on that? Was it just easy peasy, just kind of fit right in, and or was it like, getting into a whole new space?
It's definitely a whole new space. I think, even just like very high level, sort of straightforward comparison, Commonwealth's business model is, really selling community tooling to, community managers within crypto. Our target audience is, really heavily crypto people. It's people who want to do governance, sort of understand DAOs. And so it's a very different kind of approach of, how do you talk about your product? How do you sort of understand things? We also were very multi-chain. So we did a lot of work in Cosmos and ETH, a lot of different kinds of communities. So one of the cool things from that role was I was able to talk to a lot of different teams, see sort of all the different stuff going on in crypto. With 3DNS, I'm a lot more focused on like this one specific project. And also additionally, if we want any chance of building, a meaningful DNS solution, like our biggest competitors are realistically like GoDaddy and Namecheap, Google Domains, although they're winding down that business. And so it also forces us to think a lot more about non-crypto users. And so, there's definitely some, just nuances in how I have to go about doing my job a little bit differently, and, sort of the learning curve of getting involved. But, I think ultimately, once you sort of start to understand like the ethos of just like decentralized tech, if you take the time to understand how each project works, it's not too hard to start to get up to speed with like what different builders are doing.
So give me the pitch for 3DNS. I would love to know like who your target audience is, like who are you actually selling to? What are you selling? What's the, because I know there's ENS, there's unstoppable domains, there's, the dot, like there's eth.limo there.
Yep.
I mean, these aren't competitors, but this is just like all the ecosystem, right? So if you could
Yeah.
just place yourself there.
Yeah. So there's really sort of like two big camps in domains right now. You have ICANN domains, and then you have like non-ICANN domains. So, taking a quick step back, ICANN is the international certification of names and numbers, something like that. Pretty much it's this like organization that controls like what are legitimate domain names, what are the rules associated with domain names. And if you want a domain name to resolve or be usable in a browser, it has to be ICANN compliant. And so sort of over the last few years, you ended up seeing some projects like ENS, Unstoppable, Handshake pop up that sort of rejected ICANN and were like, we shouldn't trust a centralized entity to coordinate our domain names. We should build our own system entirely from scratch. And I like that. I like the ethos. Realistically speaking, like ICANN will always control what is in a browser. And that is really important technology. All websites, rely on this. And so we really approach this more from, whether you want to call it like integrating Web 2 and Web 3, Web 2.5, whatever sort of approach. But we really wanted to enable Web 2 tech to work on Web 3. And so ENS has, .eth, Unstoppable has a variety of like random endings, .coin, .bitcoin, stuff like that. We work with existing web domain endings, so .com, .xyz, .finance, .io, .net, etc. And then we enable you to bring those domains onto the blockchain. The two major benefits there are you get improved domain security, and then you get improved liquidity of these markets. So I'll first start talking a little more specifically about how the tech works, and then I'll go more into those like benefits. So pretty much we have an off-chain registrar, which is similar to how like GoDaddy works. Ultimately, it's sort of a database of who owns what domain and where they want it to be pointing to. And so you need to have one of these in order to have web domains. Once say I move georgebeal.com from my traditional registrar into 3DNS. Once it lands in our off-chain registrar, that then sends a trigger to our on-chain registrar, which works very similar to ENS, which will then send you an NFT version of that domain. At that point, the off-chain registrar will become a read-only of the on-chain registrar. And so at that point, we're really able to go NFT first, domain second, and maintain all of the benefits of the domain. When you look at some solutions like eth.limo, some of the like DNS integrations with ENS, the real big flaw with those products is that you don't actually have control over the domain. You're just pretty much putting some of the routing on chain as well. And so then you can start to use your .eth as a web domain, like with eth.limo. You can start to, receive crypto to, say georgebeal.com. But in all of these systems, I can't actually control georgebeal.com on chain. And so, where that gets important is, in these benefits we've talked about. So first is sort of security. It is pretty easy to hack domains by, if you can call up GoDaddy and convince them that you are, the founder of Curve and you got locked out of your domain, can you please redirect our domain to, this website? And that exact example with Curve happened in 2022. And so there was one day where Curve ended up accidentally displaying a phishing site and about $600,000 of user funds were stolen. And so, these are very tangible risks. And so with our system, the only way that you can update the name records for a domain is by controlling the NFT and having it in your wallet, going and updating the name records similar, you would with an ENS domain. And then the next benefits are that generally it's pretty difficult to buy and sell domains. If anyone's, tried to get a domain before, you would experience some of those frictions. Typically, it involves trying to get in touch with some broker, doing some like shakedown negotiation, going from there. And so we also believe that by bringing these domains on chain, you can manage them as on-chain assets, have them integrate with DeFi, do all kinds of cool stuff with it from there, which again, you just like can't get from, how DNS integrates with ENS.
Gotcha. So there's this conversation that's ongoing about on-chain versus off-chain. What is necessary, what needs to be on-chain, and everything else being off-chain, and it can still be decentralized, but it doesn't have to be, like, not everything has to be on the blockchain. So it sounds like from what you're describing, just the tech wise, yes, you have an NFT. That NFT gives you permissions to change DNS settings, but is that also that those DNS settings are off-chain, correct? They're on your servers, or are they also on-chain?
So they are both. So the way our system works is they can only be changed on-chain, and then our off-chain system will simply just read the data from the on-chain registrar. And so, to your point of, what needs to be on-chain, what should be off-chain, with domain names, having the name records on chain is a really big value add, because that's how you can actually guarantee the security of your domain. But then even more so, that's like the actual tangible, valuable piece of the domain name. And so by being able to have the NFT be the sole governing asset for those name records, that NFT now is actually very valuable.
Okay, so I think that one of the biggest, so the answer is on-chain is your DNS settings and stuff are on-chain, but they're taken off-chain so that they're web 2ified, right? So that your DNS is read-only on the domain, the web 2 domain, and the NFT controls those settings. So then I think one of the biggest things, and the PoolTogether community just did this, is we have these gasless subdomains, because ENS domains are great, but they're on mainnet. And if you want to change a photo or a link, or if you want to use it in any way, shape, or form, you got to pay some cold hard cash for that. And so I know that there are plans for ENS to move to an L2, but then also there's this idea of having a PoolTogether subdomain, which I love. The projects that I love, it's really cool that I can actually have subdomains. I have tim.pooltogether.eth. I have tim.wasis.eth. I would love to have more of those things. And it doesn't need to be an NFT. It doesn't need to be that. I just want to be able to update my settings, and I want to be able to cycle through my wallets. And I would love to see a directory of my friends in the community that I can message and that I can, get social with and stuff. So anyway, I'm just, I don't know what do you think about that? What do you think about gasless subdomains in general? How do subdomains work with the Web 2 world, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So overall, great question. So first, on the note of gas, I think a big unlock for domains on chain, whether you want to call them ENS, whether you want to, 3DNS or whatever, are L2s. I think, to your point, if updating your domain name costs $20, you're probably just not going to update it unless it's mission critical. And so at that point, it's not a very good product. And so with that, 3DNS will only be available for registrations on Optimism. We're considering moving to other L2s down the line, but that's not a major concern for us right now. Generally, we're really excited about everything Optimism's building. And, I think, especially with 4844 and just generally how cheap L2 transactions are, it makes this product a lot more meaningful. It's like if updating your records will cost you less than $1, that's probably not super meaningful for most people. But, I think obviously, if we can start getting closer to gasless, or at least just very, very cheap gas, I do think that's, where we need to eventually go, both for domains and also just as an industry. On the note of subdomains, so subdomains are, a thing in traditional domains. We will support them as well. There is going to be a little bit of just technical questions we're sort of sorting out right now. But Paul back when, so the founder of 3DNS, he was one of the core devs for Base. And when he was at Coinbase working on that, worked a lot with the ENS team on building out subdomains. And so there's a couple questions just as you sort of take that concept into domain names, like web domain names, but we should hopefully have some of that stuff sorted out over the next month or so. And then, we can start offering, PoolTogether web domain names as subdomains for people.
Great. Yeah. There's a use case for like individuals to offer subdomains to people, but then also for communities for sure, which is really cool. So that's awesome. So who are you selling? Like who's your customer?
Yeah. So it's a few fold. So, I think firstly, every crypto project should put their domain on our platform. There's just way too many tangible security risks in crypto right now, DNS or otherwise. We have seen a number of hacks, Curve and Ether Delta both had DNS exploits of pretty significant size. So, I think initially anyone with a high value domain, especially if they have any kind of financial services on the platform, it makes a lot of sense to just eliminate the security risk that is centralized DNS. From there, we're also working with some of the decentralized hosting providers like Fleek and Marlin and such to also offer sort of fully decentralized front ends. So, you can have the DAO pay for hosting and own the domain. And so hopefully at that point, it also starts to eliminate some of the legal liability for DeFi apps. So I think, that's sort of customer base number one. I think number two is definitely in sort of this like secondary market for domains. So generally we see there's about $2 billion in initial registrations of domain names every single year, or renewals on just total registration fees. And then there's about $2 billion in secondary sales. So some of those include like OpenAI just bought AI.com for like 15 mil. And so, right now, a lot of the secondary market is much like a lot of these like really high ticket domains. But again, it's pretty difficult to do any kind of transaction. And so, on the flip side, you look at like NFTs, and like even this year, the NFT market is on track to do $10 billion in secondary, in one of the worst, bear markets. Generally, we think that if we can start to build better technology to enable a much better secondary experience, we can start to eliminate a lot of fees, build, a better product, and just build a better secondary market for domain names. And so sort of from there is we're talking with a lot of major investors and brokers from just like traditional domain land. And, some of these guys have like 100,000, 1 million domains, all of them are worth like $10,000 plus. And secondary fees on the centralized marketplaces are in the range of like 20 to 25%. And so especially, that's a great example of just like middlemen extracting fees from people. And so we think, we can offer a much better experience, and, give a lot more value back to customers just by eliminating those fees, offering more functionality. So that's sort of like our major market that we're talking with these days. And, hopefully as we can start to build that out on chain, we'll see a variety of people that are investing in NFTs also start to want to invest in domain names.
But then with ENS, this is different, right? You're not moving your ENS addresses to 3DNS, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, got it. So you've got that. So it's really like a Web 2 play, right? It's like all of the stuff that you've got on Namecheap, Google domains, which is now Squarespace domains, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So anything else, like any cool alpha or things that we need to know about 3DNS before I move into the second part of our conversation?
Yeah. So, I mean, two fun things I'll leave for people. So, I think first, and, this is getting teased a little bit on social, but so if you notice, our website is 3dns.box. So .box is one of the newest domain endings that's being issued right now. And so it will be the first TLD, which is top level domain, pretty much just like domain ending. It'll be the first TLD that is fully on chain, but also fully ICANN compliant. And so that is going to be launching right now. Our launch date is September 13th. Just being very fair to our developers, there may be some delays on that date. But generally, I'd say at some point in the next 1 to 2 months, you'll see .box domains go live. And so this is a great opportunity to go scoop up, pretty high value domains at registration prices, just right out the gate. So, make sure to keep an eye on that. You can follow them on Twitter at Box Domains. And then we'll also be posting updates from our Twitter as well. And then the other bit is that probably later today, potentially tomorrow, we'll be announcing our rebate program. And so there'll be a lot of cool incentives for users, and those will start to diminish as more domains get onboarded. So, make sure to go take a look at the platform as soon as possible, and you guys can maximize your rebates.
Nice. I signed up for the wait list, and I really want, my name is Tim Cox, COX. So I need cox.box. Let's go. You know what I'm saying?
I will see if we can help arrange that one for you. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Hooking it up. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. You'd be surprised how many times people ask me how I spell my last name. And I'm like, how do you think it's spelled? Cool. All right. So, George, you are a BD champion, and I'm seeing a lot in your name on Discord and your ENS. You're repping that hiringdevs.eth. I get that. I like that.
Thank you.
But the thing I see in Web3 in the crypto space is people are hiring devs and they're hiring BD. A lot of times founders do BD and then they're like, I ain't got time for that. I need somebody.
Yeah.
I need to hire somebody to do BD, which is a whole conversation in itself on Twitter.
Yeah.
You've got a great thread on tips for BD for somebody who's been doing it for a long time. And so if you could just add, I come from a nonprofit marketing background. I got into crypto in November 2021 after being laid off because of COVID. And I started doing marketing. And then I was like, there's like 30 people in the space. So the best marketing I think that you could do is partnerships and new lines of business and working together and building, right? So now I'm in biz dev, I'm in partnerships, I'm in growth. So if you could give me some of your hottest tips on how to work with people, how to, as maybe a small fish, get hooked up with the big fish, like give me some coaching, sir.
Yeah. So I think the like two things that come to mind immediately, one of which you touched on a bit, is that like BD can be a lot of things. And I think one of the big questions for projects is what flavor of BD makes the most sense for what you're working on, and like thinking about that and like how can you improve that function. So, to your point, for a lot of people, it's probably going to be partnerships initially, but it can also look like just like straight marketing. It can look more like sales. It can look like DevRel, depending on what kind of project you are. So I'd say first start to think about you as a candidate that's like maybe considering what company or what job to take. Think about like what are kind of the sorts of problems you want to think about. It's like if you do lean a little bit more technical, you want to do maybe more of a DevRel versus like a straight partnerships. Maybe you look at like an L1 foundation, something that's looking to really build like a developer ecosystem. If you do want to, like, if you lean more salesy, maybe you look for something that has like an established product and like a business model and like sort of go-to-market plan, whatever. So I think, that's sort of number one. Number two is then really focusing on like, how do you solve problems? Like realistically, all business development is like figuring out what problems people have, figuring out how you can solve them, and figuring out how you convince them to let you solve their problems instead of someone else. And so a lot of it is like people highly recommend just like getting out there, going to as many events as possible, and, just trying to, meet people, talk to them, listen to them, ask what their problems are. One of my favorite questions I'll ask potential partners is like, in an ideal world, like what would you receive? Or, it's like, what is some variation of that question? Like, what is the perfect deal that you wish you could have that like no one will give you right now? And I think, like, as you start to like ask questions like that, you can start to have people, come out and be like, oh, wow, yeah, like if you can solve this, I will give you business. And like, as you start to hear more and more of those, you can then start to decide like, okay, what is the most compelling answer here? Who's the most compelling partner to work with? Who has the biggest problem and like the most commitment to working with us?
Got it. So you're in your response, I think that you're coaching me in like landing like a job, right?
So both I think the mentality is the same for if you're looking for a job, or if like say like with Pool Together, like
Yeah.
as you're talking to people, it's like you guys talk to most of the projects, and so just like really trying to listen to them. I think that's the other thing like bad BD people get wrong, is they spend a lot more time talking and like trying to convince someone that their product is the right solution, instead of spending as much time asking questions, trying to listen to them, like let your user tell you what their problems are and like why your product is the right solution.
No, I love that. I think in your thread, like there was a lot of like empathy, right? So you need to
Yeah.
have empathy to know like what that problem is. Like hanging a photo on a wall is what the
Yeah.
user wants, not a hammer, right? So if you have
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
crazy hammerless way to do that, that's fine as long as the photo gets on the wall. The same thing with relationships, right? Relationships are just so key in this industry.
Yeah.
And I'm in one of these BD Telegram groups, and that I started talking about subdomains because I was like, it'd be cool to get like a BD subdomain, because from that you create this directory, namestone.xyz.
Yeah.
They have these directory that when they do a subdomain, which is really cool that I can like actually go through, because on Telegram people don't really update their Telegram profiles. It's hard to find their Twitters, their LinkedIn,
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then, it's so in that I that was my hammer thing, was I was like, hey, let's do subdomains for BD. And then people were like, I get horrible pitches. That's all I want solved. Like their picture on the wall in their mind in this group is just quality deals, that deal
Yeah.
flow that comes
Yeah.
to them. And
Yeah.
they don't care about anything else other than that. And so it was interesting to me, because for me, the way that I operate is meeting people, learning about their project, learning all
Yeah.
these intricacies. And then what's fun is to be like, oh, here's based on my suite of connections that I have and other product knowledge that I have, not even just Pool Together. Here's some people that might be able to jive with you in what you're trying to do. And recently there's this site called portals.fi, which it's the Zaps from Zapper. They
Gotcha.
created a separate product where you could just go from token into Vault. You could swap just like you would swap on Uniswap, but into Vault. So you don't have to like even think about DApp front ends. And then Rainbow Wallet. And I'm like, let's get just in talking with those two parties about like, oh, a Pool Together, portals.fi, Rainbow integration thing would be so great for new people to crypto, that they could just swap
Yeah.
in from USDC into, say, like some weirdo, optimism token vault, or just
Yeah.
something, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
thinking about like a win-win, thinking about what that perfect storm is. And sometimes
Yeah.
it's not a two-party solution. Sometimes it's a multi-party solution. So it's fun that for me is like the people stuff, meeting people and like actually making friends and
Yeah.
talking and learning, and then coming up with these like crazy harebrained schemes that at some point hit.
Yeah.
Those are my
Yeah.
two. That's what keeps me going.
I totally agree with that. It reminded me of, if you know Seraphim from Lido. He had a tweet, I think it was yesterday, where he was like, yeah, it's wild in the BD side of crypto because the world is so small that eventually you run out of people to get introduced to. And at a certain point, someone's like, oh, have you met this guy? And it's like, oh, yeah, we used to work together. Or, oh, yeah, we worked on this project together. And it's so true. It's such a small space. And so, I think also, yeah, for people getting started, biggest recommendation is like just try and make some friends, because, yeah, like the networks are not that big. And, if you can build some genuine relationships with people, demonstrate that you're not a grifter, you're not here just to try and make a quick buck. You actually like care about the tech, or like thinking interesting thoughts and like want to do interesting work. That's the best way to get started.
No, I follow Seraphim, and another thing that you had in your tweet thread is the idea of a CRM, right? Because sure, there's only 30 people. It's a small group of people, but
Yeah.
there's still a lot of people, and there's so many conversations, and I have
Yeah.
so many like Pool Together cross Rainbow,
Yep.
Pool Together cross all, just and any group of people. I have a Pool Together conversation about that. But you were talking about using folders and like actually organizing your Telegram in that way, which I love, because you can search it, right? You can just search
Yeah.
for a keyword, or where did I talk about this, and it
Yep.
pops it up. But my a challenge for me is I work with a bunch of devs at Generation Software, which are developing, they're supporting the PoolTogether protocol. And we have this launch coming up this week. Tomorrow, we're launching the private beta of V5 of PoolTogether, which allows you to deposit any token into any ERC4626 yield source, which is so great. I'm so pumped about it.
That's awesome.
But I have to communicate to the team conversations that I have, and they're not going to go look in any Google Doc. They're not going to go look in even Notion, even though I track it in Notion. I have a CRM built in Notion where, like, anytime I have a meeting, I quick make a note and I connect it with the company entry or whatever. I'm finding that, and this is feedback from me and my, as you know, with my coworkers, is like, hey, if you can just post in the partnerships channel in our Discord, just a quick summary of like the most distilled, concentrated information that lets us know where to go or what you're doing. It like basically live in the TLDR realm.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering,
Yeah.
how do you do that? How do you do internal comms? How do you let your devs, your team know what's going on when all of what's going on is in your Telegram?
So great question that I wish I had an answer to. I can share some of the tips and lessons and tricks, but I think ultimately, at the end of the day, the best solution is the one that people will use.
That's right.
And
that's right.
that solution also is going to vary if you're a 4-person team or a 10-person team or a 20 or a 50 or an 100-person team. And so, I think generally like advice I've gotten is like, there's like the biggest inflection points for startups are when you cross 17 people and when you cross 50. So, I think in terms of, okay, so I'll take a step back. So first piece of advice is don't over operationalize your processes and don't change your processes constantly by just like adding a bunch of like random work. Like no one wants meetings to talk about the work you need to do. And then you only have like 2 hours in the week to like actually do work. So like, first off, whatever you do, try to make it like as seamless as possible. And especially try and like have as few limitations on your devs as possible. So, that's number one. Number two, like, I think oftentimes startups, like you might try a process, it doesn't work, or you don't get devs spot in, it's like for whatever reason has like some friction. So then all of a sudden you change and like next month you have an entirely new process and the next month you have a new process. And that stuff leads to like even more confusion, even more frustration, and just like so many more problems. So definitely like as you're getting something set up, spend a little bit of time thinking about it and then ultimately just like hard commit. And anyways, so into like more like actionable stuff. So from there, generally what I've done that works pretty well in the early stages is we end up, so this is like your 1 to 17-ish range. Ultimately you need someone on the tech side who's like, corralling the engineers that is also speaking in a business language, because there needs to be somebody who actually has ownership that is ensuring that like devs are building things that users want. And so, number one, like you just can't run an org that's like 100% dev first. And like devs don't really listen to biz dev. Like biz dev is like, looked down on, which like is the case in a lot of orgs. So like that's not going to work. You need somebody who can like try to cross both. So like for instance, with 3VNS, we're a team of 4 right now, 3 devs and myself. So it's pretty straightforward. I have syncs with Paul very frequently. I try to add him to all of the important calls. And so, Paul is 100% in the loop, and then he can relay information as needed to the engineers. And then, if there's like specific one-off calls, I'll hop on calls to like just talk it out with them. The issue we really hit at Commonwealth, where when I left Commonwealth, we were 22. We had about 1,000 partners that were using our product. So, again, like started hitting the point where I had to leave group chats and Telegram because there is a maximum number of group chats you can be in, and it is very high. But at that point, it's like you can't rely on phone calls. You can't, be doing daily syncs to like tell people about what's going on. You need to start to abstract away some of the process. And so in that, we would make sure to add all of the respective leads from Eng into our different group chats. And then whenever specific communities were having issues, so like, say someone had an active bug we were working on, those respective leads would be a lot more active in those chats, make sure they're keeping an eye on it. And then, if a community wasn't having, explicit issues, they would be totally free to like sort of ignore the chat a little bit. The next piece beyond that is like, I'm a really big Notion guy. I know a lot of people hate Notion. You can kind of run the same system in Google Docs, but Notion works really well with tables. And so whenever I have calls with partners, I will update the specific card for that partner. And so then, to your TLDR thing, if at any point anyone wants just like a really quick overview of like, why are we talking to this company or this person? What is our goal in working with them? Where are things at? Like, are there explicit pain points that they want addressed or, whatever? All of that context will live on this specific doc in Notion. And so then anyone can just go click to that doc and get a pretty easy overview of like the entire history of that client or partner or customer, whatever you want to call them. And so, I think getting stuff like that running quickly is important because like the other side effect is, if I'm the one that's on all of these calls, like the last thing we want is that all of the information is stuck in my head. As you sort of expand from there and get like more into Notion, Notion has a lot of really good Zapier integrations. And so Zapier is this like automation tool that uses like if this, then that logic. And so you can have it so if there like any card in your CRM gets updated, so I go in there, add some more context, you can have it automatically send that card into say a Slack channel. And so then you can have some of these feeds automatically running. And so then like devs, can just look at the Slack channel, automatically see like, oh, okay, we just had a call with this partner or whatever. Let me go look at what's going on. And you can get into a lot more sophisticated kinds of automation with Zapier. But I found that sort of that three-way link of like Zapier, Notion, Slack can start to be a pretty manageable way of translating information to the broader org.
Nice. Well, thanks for the pro tips and thanks for spending time with the PoolTogether community, George. This is awesome. I really think if you're so Web3 and you've got domains, you got to get them on 3DNS, right? Or are you truly Web3? Are you truly crypto if you've got Web2 DNSs and they're not NFTs? Come on.
Yeah, don't trust centralized registrars. We've been over this before. So.
Yeah, I mean, not your keys, not your coins, not your Ds, I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll work on that. I'll work on that language. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, George. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
All right.
Have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the PoolTogether Community Podcast. You can visit PoolTogether.com to deposit, and we'd love to hear what you thought about today's episode. So visit the PoolTogether Discord and let us know.